everyone, and welcome to Ask the Treksperts, the show where we answer your questions about Star Trek. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
Today, Brandon is filling in for Sarah because Brandon and I together watched Trek Nation, which was a documentary put out in 2011 by Eugene Roddenberry, the son of Gene Roddenberry. And as far as I can tell, it took him like 8 or 9 years to make this thing.
That's what it seemed like.
They had all this footage that he'd shot at conventions and interviews that he'd done with people over the years, and you know, going all the way back to that point. And Brandon, I don't know if you knew this, but if you knew this documentary was happening, I heard about this forever.
I had not.
Kept hearing about it. This documentary apparently almost stopped Trekkies 2 from happening.
Yeah?
Yeah, because Eugene Roddenberry was putting together his documentary, and he didn't really want another documentary to come out making fun of Star Trek fans because of what he was putting together. Now, of course, none of us at the time, some of us kind of thought he was being a little bit snooty, like, oh, Star Trek's very serious, you must take it seriously. Then we watched the movie, found out that he never took it seriously until he started making the documentary, and that's what the whole thing is about. And so I was really surprised to finally see it, and I kind of saw where he was coming from on that. And he did finally let them go ahead and make Trekkies 2.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and get into it. The documentary is very interesting, and maybe one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on Star Trek. It's funny, there are quite a few. Yeah. And and honestly, maybe it's my favorite now, because it's not just about Star Trek. It's basically this story about a kid that never really gave his dad the time of day and didn't pay enough attention to his family, and then he grew up and his dad was gone and he didn't know what he missed.
But not only that, it is a big story about that, but his dad also may have tried early on to give his son the time of day, but things evolved in such a way that he was more focused on Trek than he was on his own family.
On his own family, that's right.
And so that caused a bit of a distance there that I never would have known that had existed in that family.
Sure, yeah. You think, you know, the son of the guy who created Star Trek, surely he'd know about Star Trek. And
you would think
that wasn't the case.
And it totally opened my eyes to this, that he was about the person farthest removed from Star Trek.
Being the story guy I am, I watched this thing, and it's not a fiction. I mean, it's all true. I watched this thing being really gripped by this story about a son and his father, about a son discovering his father, who was deceased through what he created, and more so through the fans of what he created. And the only way he could really get to know that side of his father that he never knew before was through people who would work with him, naturally, and through people that were a big fan of his work. And I think he's fortunate that his dad, that he never really got to know very well, even though, I mean, like, he was, you know, 17 or 18 when his dad died. It's really sad that, I mean, he was around for long enough that he should have known his dad.
Yes,
And I think it's really interesting that he was fortunate enough to just happen to be the son of a man who created something that millions of people love.
It seemed to me that there's some very telling moments in the documentary in which there's a particular instance where a friend of the family is showing a room in a building that was a major, like, the major players in Star Trek were in this room, and there had been an instance where astronauts had showed up to talk to Gene and them, and he says, so this must have been about the time that I was in college. And the other guy goes, no, you were just doing your own thing. And you can just see the expression kind of melt off his face, like, oh my God, I could have been around for these great moments, and I was in my own little world. It really was kind of these pulling on your heartstrings. Really, it was. Yeah,
and not in like a dripping, gushing, irritating kind of way.
Right.
I was impressed with the fact that this man made this documentary that makes himself really vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a there it is type of thing.
Yeah.
Not a lead up into, oh my God.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just it's all about the truth, and the truth is right there, and he just gives it to you, you know, and it's not sugar coated, and it's very very cut and dry, and it's very kind of rough around the edges, and that's what I like about it. I really appreciate the fact that he took so long to make the thing, because it spans this very interesting history through the 2000s into almost now, up through just before the premiere of the 2009 Star Trek movie. And he's able to interview all these people that work in Star Trek at various points. He goes through the cancellation of Enterprise, so it's the first time that we've really had a major documentary that deals with Star Trek when there's not new Star Trek out.
Right.
And I really appreciated that about it.
It was nice.
It's from a perspective that you never get, which is a guy who doesn't care about Star Trek, who finally gets it.
Yes.
And I love that. It was great. I mean, it wasn't about Star Trek. It was. But the thing is, I would encourage, and there's probably not a lot of people watching this who aren't interested in Star Trek, so this is somewhat of a moot point, you know, because we're doing a show called Ask the Treksperts, but I would really encourage people who don't like Star Trek, or don't know much about Star Trek, more so, to watch this thing.
That's
because
true.
It's just a really good movie.
It is
And
more so...
People, and let me also say, it will have people in it that you will be interested to hear their thoughts of, that aren't necessarily all that involved with Star Trek.
If you didn't know anything about Star Trek to begin with, there are elements of Star Trek. It does talk about Gene Roddenberry and his life, but at the heart of it, it is the story of a son who was very distant getting to know his father. When I would almost liken it to the Spock-Sarek relationship.
Interesting. All right.
It has very many parallels. I think.
It does, and I didn't think of that. You're absolutely right.
Kind of just a strange coincidence, but I think that's a great. If you know Star Trek, you know just what I'm talking about. It does kind of just have that parallel.
I kind of found myself at first thinking, here's kind of a sad, depressing kid. He's not a kid anymore, but here's a sad, depressing guy with Eugene Roddenberry, who never really did anything with himself, who had all these aspirations when he went to college to become like an astrophysicist and stuff that never panned out, of course.
Now he's intelligent.
And yeah, he's intelligent, but he had no direction.
Right, he did not have a direction.
Making this documentary gave him a direction. I don't know what he's doing now. I don't know if he's got a job. I don't know if he's working. I don't know what he's doing. And it would be sad if this was the only legacy he had, because he needs to do something on his own. You know what I mean?
And he really could.
But yeah, but as it went along, I found him very sympathetic. I got to really appreciate this person, and it made sense how he wound up in the place that he was. And what I really like, it's hard not to look at this as a story, because it is a story. It's a real story.
It is a true story. Totally real.
What I really took from it was going back to something you said earlier. It wasn't just his fault for not getting to know his father.
Right.
It was Gene Roddenberry's fault, too, for distancing himself too much from his family.
It was.
He's got that interview that he does with Majel Barrett, his mother, of course, who I thought was pretty distant. And he even says, you know, I don't think my mother understood what I was trying to do here. I couldn't get enough out of her about Dad.
That's true, and you can see it when she talks. You can just see
she's very reserved, and she stops a lot. She's like, do I want to say that? I don't think I want to say that. And there's a lot of that going on. And I got the sense that it really was the way she described it, that it was the kind of household where nobody talked about anything personal. Everybody was very closed off.
I also get the sense, in the way she looked, I get the sense that maybe she didn't even like her own involvement in Star Trek.
I wouldn't go that far.
You don't think so?
No, I wouldn't even go that far.
I got the sense that there might be times that she...
That's sure not how she's come off in other interviews, and that's not how people who... Now, I haven't met her. I didn't meet her before she passed away. But a lot of people I know that did, that's sure not the impression I got from them. I would pause before I said that.
Well, here, let me... maybe I said kind of the wrong thing. What I mean to say is... what they said in the movie is absolutely right. It seemed like she didn't get what her son was trying to do.
Right.
And maybe that's more where I'm pulling that from. If she didn't get that, then she is going to be absolutely more reserved. But it seems like there were, aspects of Star Trek she didn't care for.
Maybe so. I didn't get that from her at all. Because we didn't get to hear her say very much because she was so distant and she wasn't very forthcoming. More what I got from her was she wasn't real sure how to talk about Jean with other people. More of what I got, really, the interview had nothing to do with Star Trek. I mean, more what I got from her was Gene was very distant. He worked constantly. I didn't get to see him very much, and he slept around on me all the time.
Maybe it's not that she didn't know how to talk about it. She didn't want to talk about it.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, I can see that. What gets me about this documentary is he states very plainly at the beginning what this is and what he's trying to do. He doesn't start out saying... He doesn't paint this perfect picture that Star Trek painted when it arrived on the scene. He paints this very bleak picture of, I had a father who I knew nothing about. Let's find out who he is.
And the best thing is, like bleak at first, and then as it goes along, he's got that great section where he's finding out from writers and producers who worked with Roddenberry. I love all the stuff with DC Fontana. She's very forthcoming. Yes. She comes right out and says stuff. She's very opinionated. They didn't leave on good terms because he kept rewriting all of her scripts. These are things I knew, but it was really great seeing Fontana talk about it. Right. And it was really good that he was able to talk to all these people before some of them passed away. Now, DC Fontana's still alive, but of course, Majel Barrett's gone, and he talked to Matt Jeffries, I think. Matt Jeffries passed away a few years ago now. Again, it's really great that he was able to do this over so many years, because if he had waited, he wouldn't have gotten half these interviews. Well, not half, but a lot of the really important ones he wouldn't have had. He's got that great part where he's talking to people that worked with Gene, who were now that everything's said and done, and Gene Roddenberry's not with us anymore, didn't mind talking about his. The fact that he slept around with his wife, and all that kind of stuff, and how he was so promiscuous and everything, and but I really like the part where Eugene says, you know, it's unfortunate that Dad was like this and they did this to my mother, but it humanized him for me. He says that, and it's true. You know, I mean, it made him. I saw this other side to him. It made me realize he was a person. He wasn't just this. He made mistakes too. He wasn't just this larger than life figure that was better than everybody else, and who I could. Most importantly, I think, and I love that he never comes out and says this, that I could never begin to live up to. And I think that part of the thing with, I'm even going to call it a character arc, even though he's a person. Part of what he learns through this movie, part of his arc is, I think, is that maybe part of the reason that he never focused on anything and never found a path of his own was because he was afraid he was always going to live in the shadow of his father. He was living in the shadow of his father. Keep in mind, to Gene Roddenberry's fans, he was a god. Yeah. He was a god. What's they say? The bird of the universe? The great bird of the galaxy. The great bird of the galaxy. That's how people were thinking about him, and his son was like, I had nowhere to go with this. I would encourage every Star Trek fan to watch this movie, because you'll discover these things about Roddenberry that you wouldn't know if you've only watched the other documentaries and special features on discs that kind of paint Roddenberry as this larger-than-life figure. Look, he was a visionary. He was also a human being who made a lot of mistakes. That's right. And he wasn't a great storyteller in a lot of ways, you know? All the other documentaries are going to paint him as the guy he was on set. Yeah, you know, he's going to be that guy. You're not hearing about the times he went to the parties. Well, how many of those people wouldn't know that stuff, right? Sorry. Yeah, how many of those people wouldn't know? They wouldn't. And this really brought it into great perspective. Now, I got to say, I read a documentary. I read a biography about Gene Roddenberry that did go into all of this promiscuousness and all that kind of stuff. So I knew about some of that stuff. But what I got, the majority's not going to. Of course, and what? Yeah. But what? Not everybody read that book, of course. And what I got from this movie that I couldn't have gotten from anywhere else was this personal story. Yes. About this other person that I didn't know I cared anything about. Right. And I didn't know I cared anything about Eugene either. Like, seriously. I was skeptical when you asked me to watch this. I was really skeptical. I would have been skeptical too, but I already saw it and I said, Brandon, you've got to watch this thing. So we sat down to watch this, and I was like, yeah, I got a few hours. It was already late at night, but I didn't have to go to work the next day. And I'm like, let's do this. I'm up late anyway. Let's do this. So we started watching it, and I'm like, huh, this is really something. This is
a human story that tugs at your heartstrings.
And let me say, it's also just a really, really well-made documentary. One thing that I really appreciated was all of the footage of Roddenberry that I'd never seen before. If you watch this movie, especially if you're a big Star Trek fan and you've seen a lot of interviews, I'm telling you, you're going to see a whole bunch of Gene Roddenberry interviews you've never seen before. Stuff I didn't know existed. And that was really cool. He had a whole lot of archived footage and stuff that nobody knew about. And because his last name is Roddenberry, he opened a bunch of doors for interviews that he couldn't have gotten any other way. And if I didn't come to care about what he was doing so much, I would have thought, oh, well, you know, you got these great interviews because your last name's Roddenberry. And at the end of the day, I was really glad that he did. The stuff with Will Wheaton was really sad.
It was, but
And a great interview, but really sad. Because Will Wheaton was almost, he came off like, he was almost the son to Roddenberry that he wished his own son had been.
It's true, and the character was written in such that way.
Yeah.
And Will Wheaton talks about that, but it also shows, and I know a bit about Will Wheaton because I've read some things that he's talked about. Will Wheaton had an estranged view of the show himself, and even though Roddenberry was trying to write for him in such a way that he could make him his son he never had, Will Wheaton was lacking the understanding of this at the time.
Right.
And he didn't understand how to work with it. And so that really pulls you too. And seeing the two of them, the real son and the set son, the on-set son of Gene Roddenberry, basically.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting juxtaposition. But once you find out what Will Wheaton has to say, and then you think about Will Wheaton's earlier episodes in Trek, you can really see it. You can really understand it.
Frakes said something, Jonathan Frakes said something I'd never thought about before. I think it was Frakes who made this point, when he said that there are 3 characters in that movie, in TNG, that are kind of reflections of Roddenberry.
Yes, yes,
he says that Picard, Riker, and Wesley Crusher are all 3 different aspects of Roddenberry's personality. And he goes into that, and I'd never thought about it like that, and he's absolutely right about it.
It was very cool. But I will say that the best part of this movie, and we talked about this when we watched it, and I think you'll agree, the best part was an interview that he was able to get. And it wasn't because of the man he was talking to. It wasn't because this is who this is. It's because of what this man did and how this man respects the other end of the token that he was talking about, was George Lucas.
Well, and here's the thing about Lucas. He is the other person in the movie that I came to like more because I watched this.
Exactly. I have such a deeper respect for him after having seen his interview.
I had somewhat different feelings about him because George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, the thing that has been a rival with Star Trek ever since it's existed.
That's right.
George Lucas really, really eloquently articulates what I've been saying for years about the 2 franchises, which is they're 2 different things. There's no, I mean, he doesn't come out and say there's no reason for this rivalry, but he has an appreciation for Star Trek. He has an affinity for it, and what he says is, and I'm not just saying I liked the interview because George Lucas says I like Star Trek.
Exactly.
What I'm saying is, it was really great that he says that Star Wars is what it is.
Yes.
He says, well, look, Star Wars is action-driven. We got George Lucas not pretending like Star Wars is this like big idea science fiction piece because he didn't intend it to be that. That's not what it is. He says Star Wars is action driven and Star Trek is idea driven, and guess what? There's room for both. We should have both. One should not be held over the other. They're different different tastes. And then we've got an interview with Roddenberry who says that he found, who says, "Oh yeah, I like Star Wars."
Yeah, it was great to see the 2 men respecting each other as
it was cool.
individuals,
and who probably never had a discussion, probably had never talked before.
Right.
And he found this great interview where Roddenberry says, not everything has to be these really deep kind of morality plays. He says sometimes, this was an interview I think he did like 86 or something, 82, 86, somewhere in the early 80s and early mid-80s, and he says, sometimes it's okay to also just have fun.
That's right.
It's a really, really good watch.
It is, and that's, you know, that may be a great part, but it is just one of many great parts. It was my favorite part, seeing the George Lucas interview, him going
I
to
love that he got
ranch.
so much out of Lucas. I mean, because did you notice watching it that Eugene seemed like very nervous talking to Lucas?
Yeah, Lucas was just really laid back, just like, you know, just talking about.
Well, also, if you've ever seen any footage of him making the prequels, that's also how he directs too.
That's true.
Like this, and that's how he directs. But yeah, he was of course really laid back. But Eugene was on eggshells talking to Lucas. I mean, he was just scared to death of him.
He was worried about the drive up there, going to see him,
George
just what
Lucas,
he was going to encounter.
Would talk about anything you wanted him to talk about. And he was really respectful and really had a lot of reverence for Star Trek and for Gene Roddenberry, and I had a lot of respect for what he said. I thought it was great.
I had for some time, and I haven't had this view in a long time, but for some time I had been under the impression that Star Wars had been created as a direct opposition. I don't know
really?
why I don't know why I ever thought that.
I never got that, but
that opinion melted away for me some years ago.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were going to say with this movie. Okay.
No, it's for some years ago.
Okay,
but
sure.
Seeing...
You can tell that's not the case.
Right. Seeing just how much he did respect the sci-fi genre, he knew he wasn't making sci-fi, and it was almost saying, like, look, I didn't make sci-fi. I made this fantasy film. You know,
he calls it space opera.
Yeah, it's space opera. He's like, I made this space opera film.
It's a space opera, yeah.
I made this film. It is removed. They are not at odds with each other. They're two separate entities. That was a really good...
And it's okay to like both!
It's okay to like both.
And they permeate the culture, and there's room for both, and we should like both.
Now, I already did like both.
So did I.
To those people who are just so diametrically opposed, say, open your hearts, people. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you could tell Lucas wasn't just saying something that he had, like, scripted beforehand or something.
Right.
He obviously knew what Star Trek was. He might not be a big Star Trek fan, he might not know a whole lot about it, but, like, he could talk about what made those characters work in original series. He got all that.
He knew who Gene Roddenberry was. He had the knowledge to be able to talk just like stream of consciousness, like come out and say, you know, this is how it is. This is how it was. It was never intended to be this way. People took it this way. You know, they should take it this way.
Eugene Roddenberry used a whole lot of footage from that. I mean, like, we got a whole lot of that interview, which I really appreciated. There's lots of great interviews. He talks to Stan Lee for a little bit. Not a whole lot with him, but he's there. And he talks to, honestly, fewer actors than I would have expected, but they're there.
There are, yes, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more as we know,
Nichelle Nichols was there, but then like Shatner wasn't.
Right.
And you didn't have Shatner. You didn't have Nimoy.
You didn't have Nimoy, and while
was Patrick Stewart interviewed? Oh, why can't I remember now?
I'm not sure, but I do know that at least over the years
not in much. Yeah.
Over the years that this would have been made, we probably had a couple of deaths within there that probably those might have been the reasons why we didn't see interviews, because he may have waited too long on certain people.
Yeah.
But
everybody I'm talking about's alive now.
That's true.
Those were the ones I was most surprised not to see were Shatner and Nimoy, because he got such big. I mean, he didn't have a problem getting any big names. You know what I mean? Like he got most of the people you'd really want to see. But who knows? There might have been just a lot of people who didn't want to be interviewed.
Like James Doohan. He, as far as I can tell, James Doohan didn't really like to talk about his time on.
Well, also you got to remember that Jimmy Doohan died. Well, Jimmy Doohan was already in bad enough shape he wouldn't have done any interviews by the time he started this thing. And he died in like, wow, I feel bad not remembering this exactly. He died at either before this started getting made or right after.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he died in 04, 05, I want to say.
I don't remember.
I can't remember if I was in high school or if it was just after high school, but I remember wanting to go to a convention just before he died, and I remembered I had just started going to conventions, and that means it was within 03 to 05. So I mean, it was early. I'm just saying he couldn't have gotten Doohan. There's no way. Doohan wouldn't have even been in the shape to talk if he was still around.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, aside from those small things, it was an excellent movie. I went into watching it with a preconception and a skepticism, and I came out with it with a respect and recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on Netflix, so if you have a Netflix account, you can watch it. And like I said, it just came out in 2011. I was just really impressed that he took as long to make it as he did, because I think he got a lot of stuff from later, because he talks to Abrams, and we get all of that.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
I wish he talked to Chris Pine a little bit, but
that would have been cool.
And stuff like that. But anyway, so yeah, it's really, really good, and I think it's interesting even if you don't know much about Star Trek. And then if you do know about Star Trek and you think, well, Eugene Roddenberry can't tell me anything I didn't already know. There's a whole angle there. There's a whole different dimension.
I will say this, something you just mentioned. Seeing the interview with JJ didn't really change my already set opinion on JJ and the Star Trek.
It didn't change my opinion about that movie, but here's the thing. I already have issues with those movies and like J.J. Abrams as a person from everything I've seen of him.
Right.
Although, I mean, I've heard of some things that people have said from interviews and things that I never saw, but every time I see stuff with him, he seems like a pretty stand-up guy.
He does, but my issue lies with his involvement, and I won't get into that there. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, sure. And I agree with you, absolutely.
But
I just think that he was hired
to
do a job, and he was maybe not the right guy for the job. That's all I've ever thought about it. I can't take it personally with that guy.
No, I can't either. But his interview did bring a little bit to the table in the movie. It was by no means just there because he did the Star Trek movie. I think it did have a little bit to add.
Oh yeah, I think it did too. I also don't think that his interview with Eugene helped him understand Star Trek any better than he does.
Not exactly. That's what I'm saying. It didn't change my opinion about how I felt about his involvement, but it did. It was all part of the underlying story.
Well, so we both obviously recommend the film, so do go watch it, especially if...
2 thumbs up for me.
Yeah. Watch it, especially if you really know Star Trek, and watch it even if you don't. And thanks, everybody, for watching us talk about this movie. We really appreciate it. And Sarah and I will be back with you again very soon with another episode of Ask the Treksperts. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
See you next time.